Early life and struggles. Nelson Mandela's journey began in the small village of Mvizo, nestled in the heart of South Africa's Eastern Cape. Born in 1918 to Gadla Henry Mfakaniiswa, a respected chief, and Nosekeni Fanny, Mandela was destined to be molded by the land and its traditions. His early life, surrounded by the rhythms of African village life, seemed peaceful, but it was also defined by the shadows of colonial oppression. Though young, Mandela absorbed the whispers of injustice that permeated the land, never knowing that these whispers would one day shape his life's mission. As a child, Mandela was taught the ways of his people, learning not only from books but from the wisdom of elders and the resilience of his community. His father's death when Mandela was just 9 years old left a void, but it also forced him to face the harshness of reality. Sent to live with the Thembu royal family, Mandela's worldview expanded. It was here, under the guidance of his mentor, Chief John Jintaba, that Mandela began to understand the depths of racial injustice that permeated the fabric of South African society. At age 16, Mandela experienced the rite of passage into adulthood, a circumcision that marked the beginning of his formal education. However, it wasn't the classroom lessons that shaped him most, but the harsh realities of racial inequality he began to encounter as he grew older. Attending Fort Hare University, Mandela was exposed to the profound tensions between the black population and the white government. The academic environment ignited a sense of urgency within him, and he quickly became involved in student activism, challenging the racial policies that oppressed his people. His spirit, once tempered by village life, was now inflamed with a new purpose: to fight for freedom. In Johannesburg, Mandela's struggle took on new forms. As he worked as a lawyer, he encountered the staggering racial discrimination that black South Africans faced in daily life. His first-hand experience with the legal system, which was designed to oppress rather than protect, fueled his determination to fight. It was here that he met Walter Sisulu, a mentor and friend who would later become instrumental in his political rise. Together, they worked to provide legal aid to those trapped by apartheid's oppressive laws. But Mandela's desire for justice could no longer be contained within the walls of his law office. He joined the African National Congress, ANC, aligning himself with a group of determined leaders committed to the overthrow of apartheid. The ANC was more than a political party to Mandela. It became the crucible in which his ideals would be tested. It was here that he began to understand the full scale of the struggle ahead. The fight against apartheid was not just political, it was a matter of life and death. The first sparks of resistance were small, individual acts of defiance, but soon Mandela and his comrades would begin to rally the masses. However, even as he began to challenge the status quo, Mandela was aware of the monumental challenges ahead. He had no illusion about the cost of his journey. His fight was a battle not just for justice, but for the very soul of his country. In the years that followed, Mandela's resolve would be tested in ways he could never have imagined, setting him on a path that would change not only his life but the future of an entire nation. The fight against apartheid. As Mandela's political awareness deepened, so did his resolve to dismantle the apartheid system that stifled his people. The African National Congress, ANC, became more than just a party, it was the vessel of resistance. In the 1940s, the ANC's methods of protest became more radical, and Mandela, now a young lawyer, found himself drawn to the front lines of this struggle. It was here that he met the man who would become his close comrade and mentor, Walter Sisulu. Sisulu, a former anti-apartheid activist and ANC leader, saw the spark in Mandela, and soon, they were working side by side to challenge a regime that held the black majority in chains. Mandela, with his firm belief in justice, was reluctant to accept mere passive resistance. By the mid-1940s, the ANC had adopted a more militant approach, and Mandela found himself on the precipice of a new kind of warfare. The establishment of Umkhonto we Sizwe, MK, the ANC's armed wing, marked the turning point. Mandela became one of its founding members, committing himself to sabotage and guerrilla warfare rather than the passive protests of the past. He realized that to truly disrupt apartheid, they needed to strike at the very heart of the government, not just protest in the streets. The violence of oppression had to be met with the violence of resistance. But as MK's campaigns grew bolder, so did the risks. The apartheid government, now led by the National Party, had no tolerance for dissent. Mandela knew his actions would have consequences, and he was prepared to face them. Yet, even as the struggle escalated, Mandela remained an advocate for peace. He believed in a future where a democratic South Africa would rise from the ashes of apartheid, and he feared that excessive violence might turn the people against their cause. His internal battle was as fierce as the one he fought on the streets. In 1961, just as the stakes reached their highest, Mandela was arrested along with several other ANC leaders during the infamous Rivonia trial. The trial itself was a spectacle, with the government hoping to make an example of these men. But Mandela, steadfast and unyielding, used the trial as a platform to declare his commitment to the cause of freedom. "I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination," he said, cementing his identity not just as a political leader, but as a symbol of the moral fight for justice. His words, though defiant, were laced with the understanding that he would likely never walk free again. In court, he faced the death penalty, yet he remained calm, knowing that his words would resonate far beyond the courtroom. The charges were clear: treason, sabotage, and conspiracy to overthrow the government. But for Mandela, the charges were a badge of honor. He was willing to pay the price for the future of his people, knowing that the movement he had joined would not be silenced, even if he were imprisoned. The trial ended with Mandela sentenced to life imprisonment, a ruling that would send shockwaves throughout the world. Outside the courtroom, the fight for freedom was far from over. The international community began to rally around Mandela, creating a global movement that called for his release. Yet, behind bars, Mandela's resolve only strengthened. His imprisonment was no longer just a personal sacrifice. It had become the rallying cry for the world to unite against apartheid. And so, the struggle continued. The fight for justice, now more than ever, was a fight for the soul of South Africa itself. The release and transformation. The years behind bars had not broken Nelson Mandela. Instead, they had forged him into an enduring symbol of resistance. For 27 long years, he had endured isolation, physical labor, and the harsh conditions of Robben Island, yet the fire of his spirit never dimmed. When the winds of change finally swept through South Africa in the late 1980s, they carried with them the promise of his freedom. The apartheid regime, weakened by international sanctions and internal unrest, had begun to falter. In 1990, amid a growing global movement demanding his release, Mandela was freed. The moment of his release on February 11, 1990, was nothing short of historic. As Mandela emerged from the gates of Victor Verster prison, the world witnessed not just the liberation of a man, but the unshackling of an entire nation's hope. His first steps outside the prison were slow, deliberate, as if he were trying to absorb the magnitude of what had just occurred. He was met by an eruption of joy, the cheers of his people, but Mandela's face remained stoic. His gaze swept over the sea of humanity that awaited him, yet his thoughts were elsewhere. He knew the fight was far from over. Mandela understood that freedom, while a victory, came with a heavy burden. The country that awaited him was fractured, divided by years of violence, mistrust, and racial hatred. His release did not signal the immediate end of apartheid, but it was a vital step in dismantling its foundation. He immediately set about using his newfound position not for revenge, but for reconciliation. His leadership would not be defined by the bitterness of the past, but by the hope of the future. The political landscape had changed dramatically during Mandela's imprisonment. The ANC, now led by figures like Thabo Mbeki and Oliver Tambo, had gained significant momentum, and the government of President F.W. de Klerk, recognizing the inevitability of change, had taken tentative steps toward negotiation. Mandela and de Klerk, once enemies, began to meet behind closed doors. The talks were tense, fraught with distrust, but Mandela's calm demeanor and unwavering commitment to peace helped keep the channels open. His efforts toward negotiation culminated in the historic unbanning of the ANC and other political organizations. But the true test came with the question of what to do with the legacy of apartheid. Despite the violence of the past, Mandela held firm to his belief that a new South Africa could only emerge if all its people, black and white, could coexist as equals. He was not blind to the challenges ahead, but he knew that compromise was essential to building the foundation of a peaceful democracy. Mandela's rise to the presidency in 1994 was a momentous occasion, but even more significant was his approach to leadership. Instead of seeking retribution, he focused on the future, establishing the Truth and Reconciliation Commission to help the nation confront its painful past. His presidency was not marked by vengeance, but by forgiveness, a guiding principle that would shape his legacy. Through it all, Mandela remained steadfast in his belief that unity, not division, was the key to healing a nation broken by decades of hatred. As the first black president of South Africa, Mandela's role was more than just a political victory. It was a statement to the world that peace could emerge from the darkest of struggles. The old guard of apartheid had been overthrown, and in its place stood a new nation, not free from challenges, but built on the promise of equality and reconciliation. His transformation from prisoner to president was not just a personal journey, it was the transformation of a nation. The struggle, Mandela realized, was not over, it had only just begun. Legacy and reflections. Even after stepping down from the presidency in 1999, Nelson Mandela's work was far from finished. His role as a global statesman continued to evolve, as the world looked to him not just as the father of modern South Africa, but as a beacon of hope for oppressed peoples everywhere. Yet, even as his stature grew, Mandela remained grounded, focusing not on his personal legacy, but on ensuring that the new South Africa he had fought so hard to build would endure. His life, now spent mostly in retirement, became a living testament to the power of resilience, forgiveness, and the belief that a better future was possible. Mandela's post-presidential years were marked by a deep commitment to social justice, particularly in combating the HIV/AIDS epidemic that ravaged South Africa. Despite facing criticism for his initial silence on the matter, Mandela later became one of the most vocal advocates for AIDS awareness, using his platform to challenge the stigma surrounding the disease. His personal connection to the issue deepened when he lost his